How you doing? This is the Common Sense Party podcast. I'm your host, DOTTLEY, coming to you from, I guess, my living room. Um, I am the host of this political podcast. The Common Sense Party podcast mission is to bring listeners on the topics that affect the everyday rate. A person, rate, review, follow, subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We are available on wherever you get your podcast platforms. We're available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Samsung Podcast, Pandora, YouTube Music, TuneIn, yes, and we are now on Apple. Please give us 5 stars, give us 4 stars, give us 3 stars, give us 2 stars. If you don't give us any stars, I'll just assume I'm doing it properly. You can reach us at the Common Sense Party Pod at gmail.com or on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever your social media platforms. You can support via Cash App or Zelle. The information is available on the About page of podcasts. Okay. As you know, it's Independence Day, and we have had some rulings on some things. Also, there was a past debate. Okay, for context reasons, due to the debate performance, do you think that Trump Trump won the election or Biden lost the election? But first, the Supreme Court put a ruling in.
Court has finally ruled on the question that we've been waiting for in one of the most consequential decisions of our lifetimes. On the question of whether or not Donald Trump had immunity to commit crimes with impunity as president, the Supreme Court has ruled that a president has immunity for official acts, but not for unofficial acts, and that the question should be remanded back to the trial court for further proceedings. Here's what that means. Simply put, it means more delay. The justices will direct Judge Chutkan to hold more hearings to see whether any of the acts alleged in Trump's indictment might enjoy some sort of outer perimeter immunity. And of course, what that actually means will be up to the discretion of the Supreme Court. So now it'll be up to Judge Chutkan to hold these hearings and then return the question to the Supreme Court for them to rule further. You've heard the expression, justice delayed is justice denied. This is the embodiment of that quote. To be clear, the whole basis for this case is utterly insane, even for this Supreme Court that is so nakedly in the tank for Donald Trump. Remember, what Trump was claiming was that as president, he had carte blanche to commit criminal acts with impunity, namely seeking to defraud the United States, prevent Americans from exercising their right to a free and fair election, and attempting to block the counting of electoral votes in Congress. In fact, far from contending that a president should have immunity for criminal activity, he contends that a president needs to have immunity for criminal activity.
And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity, and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong, I'm working for the country, and I worked on free elections. We have to have strong borders, we have to have free elections. Those two things, almost above all. And we found tremendous voter fraud. We have a list of it. We have some findings if you want it. The press doesn't like reporting it, but we found tremendous voter fraud, determinative voter fraud. But we worked on that. That's what I was doing. And they were talking about after. Well, nothing has to do with after I left. It was during the time. And that was what they really focused on today during the appeal. And they concede that, and everybody concedes that. And if it's during the time, you have absolute immunity.
He's couched this whole bogus argument in this idea that his criminal behavior was warranted because he won the 2020 election, and so he needed to do whatever was necessary to prevent purportedly rigged results from being certified. Only, small problem, there was no voter fraud, and certainly not, as he claimed, determinative voter fraud. You know how I know? Because the Trump campaign and its allies brought 65 court cases forward, and in zero were they able to prove a modicum of fraud, far less any degree of fraud that would have actually changed the outcome of the election. And that includes in front of at least 8 judges who Donald Trump himself appointed. And the Supreme Court also refused to take up a single case related to the 2020 election results, even despite the fact that the court is 6-3 conservative and includes 3 justices who, again, Donald Trump appointed. So either the entire judiciary, including Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh, along with a raft of other federal judges, are all part of a deep state plot to deprive Donald Trump of his rightful win in the 2020 election, opting instead to cater to the deep state Democrats who conspired to help Joe Biden, or Donald Trump just lost and was so desperate not to seem like a loser that he invented a fantasy that the election was stolen from him out of whole cloth. Take all the time you need with that one. Trump has also been hinging his argument on claims like this, quote, without presidential immunity, a president of the United States literally could not function. It should be strong immunity where proper decisions can be made, where our country can be powerful and thrive, and where opponents cannot hold up and extort a future president for political gain. It is a big decision, an important decision, a decision which can affect the success or failure of our country for decades to come. We want a great country, not a weak, withering, and ineffective one. Strong presidential immunity is a must. So that we're clear, not only could a president function without criminal immunity, but every single president in the history of the United States has somehow managed to function without it. There hasn't been a single president who has availed himself of this non-existent criminal immunity. And yet somehow, Trump is trying to gaslight us into thinking that it's impossible to be president without it. Here's a hint. The only people who argue that you need criminal immunity to do your job are criminals. And what's more criminal than this hypothetical situation laid out by federal appeals court judges who recognize that the natural conclusion of Trump's insane claims of full presidential immunity was that a president could have his political opponent assassinated with zero repercussions?
President ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. That's an official act in order to SEAL Team 6.
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
But if he weren't, there would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that.
Chief Justice's opinion were against Madison and our Constitution and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is
no.
My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which require impeachment and conviction by the Senate. In these exceptional cases, as the OLC memo itself points out from the Department of Justice, you'd expect a speedy impeachment and conviction.
And not for nothing, but if you find yourself arguing that you should be able to have people killed, you're probably not on the right side. And so given all of this, for the Supreme Court to continue humoring this insanity by remanding the case back to the trial court to further engage in this nonsense is a testament to just how broken and how in the tank they are for this criminal politician. The whole process has reeked of corruption, from taking it up after it was properly adjudicated by both a trial court and an appeals court, then handing Trump over 100 days of delay by refusing to rule on it until the literal last day of their term, and then giving Trump yet further delay by remanding it back to the trial court. The only way the Supreme Court could be more helpful to Donald Trump is if they argued this case on his behalf too. And so now the question becomes, what happens next? Here's my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner discussing the possibilities and how much more delay might be on the horizon.
Frankly, I think the Supreme Court is going to give Donald Trump the delay he so desperately covets by remanding it to Judge Chutkan with directions to hold some more hearings and decide whether any of the acts alleged in the indictment might be within a president's official duties, even if they dwell on the perimeter of those official duties. So let's break it into two parts now. If there is a remand with a direction from the Supreme Court to hold more hearings, that will basically look like one of two things. And depending on which one of these things is involved, I think we're looking at two very different time frames. Let's assume that they remand it to Judge Chutkan and they say, Judge, we want you to go through each act alleged in Donald Trump's indictment, give the parties an opportunity to argue, the parties meaning the defense attorneys and the prosecutors, to argue whether each act is or is not an official presidential act. Is it within the scope of a president's official duties, even out on the outer perimeter of those official duties, hear arguments from the parties, make your ruling, your factual findings, and then return it to us for further proceedings in the Supreme Court. That can be done quickly. Brian, literally that could be done in a matter of weeks. Now, once it's returned to the Supreme Court, all bets are off. Who knows how long the Supreme will sit on it as sort of phase two in granting the delay that Donald Trump wants. But then the second alternative is they return it to Judge Chutkan and they direct her to hold evidentiary hearings. An evidentiary hearing is different from the hearing I just described. The hearing I just described simply involves the parties, the prosecutors and the defense, arguing their respective positions, official duties, not official duties. But an evidentiary hearing means you have to begin to gear up to call witnesses to really drill down and develop the evidence that pertains to each one of these acts of Donald Trump to discern whether they're official acts, not official acts, outer perimeter acts, or beyond the outer perimeter. If it bogs down with evidentiary hearings, the parties are going to have to, amass the evidence. They're going to have to get the witnesses lined up. There's going to have to be testimony, direct examination, cross-examination, redirect, and it will be a very long, drawn-out affair. That will guarantee that it will not be returned to the Supreme Court anytime soon.
And of course, today we're going to be doing even further analysis on this point. So if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. So at this point, the Supreme Court has effectively done Trump's bidding and all but guaranteed that he won't stand trial for his democracy-busting crimes before the November election. All of which underscores this point. If you think the Supreme Court is broken now, it will be so much worse if Trump wins in November and nominates two young replacements for Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who are both in their mid-70s and who are virtually guaranteed to retire if Trump wins. That will mean a entrenched Republican rule on the court for the rest of our lives. We have one chance to stop that and to prevent further miscarriages of justice like the one we saw today, and that is by showing up in November in numbers like we've never shown up before. So turn your anger into action, make sure you have a plan to vote, and send a message to the Supreme Court that its days enabling Trump and Republicans' corruption are going to come to an end.
All right. Okay, he said a couple of things that were thought-provoking. Number one, yes, he's going to delay. And the ruling is the president has immunity on official acts, non-official acts. The question is, what is an official act? There's a non-official act. Also, he would have, I think the only one he would, well, there's two. Was he in office then? No, there's only one he would probably get off on, and that's the RICO case in Georgia. They can say he was trying to get voter fraud information, but he will be on the one he got convicted for because he was not in office yet. He was a presidential nominee. And Mar-a-Lago case because he had lost. He wasn't the president. He already left office, so only one case he'll probably get off on if that holds up. All right. The other thing is the Supreme Court. Yeah, the Supreme Court has nine people, 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats, if you want to put it that way. And if 2 retire, it'll be, so you take 2, 4, and 3, 2 and 2, and you put on 2 on a Democrat, it'll be 5-4. It'll be 5-4. Because, no, it's 6-3. 6-3, you take off 2, that's 4 and 3, which are those, I think one of the, there's Andy Corbin Barrett, the other old dude already went. That's how Jackson came on. So it's going to be 4-3. And if you put on, it'll be 6-3 again. But if Biden wins, which I think he will, and those 2 retire, which they're in their 70s, and you can force them to retire, hopefully. and then you put on 2, and it'll be 5-4 liberals. I think we can get it done. All right. Yeah, we're going to take a pause from the politics to it is the start of hurricane season, and we've had a major hurricane hit Caribbean. Fun fact, I had an aunt named Beryl, so is she coming back to haunt us? Who knows? But let's check it out.
Has crossed a portion of the Windward Islands as an intense Category 4 storm this morning. So Beryl made landfall shortly after 11 on Grenada's Caracau Island with maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. The storm chaser Brandon remained over for under active as he frequently contributes to our coverage. He captured the dangerous winds as Beryl ripped off roofs and sent debris flying. Brandon shared via social media that the roof was torn off of the building where he had that live stream camera set up. Thankfully, Brandon is okay, and he's now in the process of capturing the devastation left behind there in parts of Grenada. This was a really nasty setup here and a scary time for some, certainly for sure.
We, as Caribbean Americans, we are aware of Category 5s. Say a prayer for them, and if you want to donate, you can donate to the Red Cross. Also, you can donate to us, and we can pass along your money to locals. Because this is a hurricane season. It's Category 5, and this is just what first month. They have predicted 7 hurricanes and 4 make a Category 4 or above. Global warming. So, if you want to help, you can donate to the podcast. It is available on the About page. And now, let's get on to more of the show. Say a prayer for all the islands. Jamaica, Curacao, Cancun. It might be heading to Texas. We're gonna still go ahead and let's get some more insight on immunity case, because I still say he's gonna. The only one that he'll probably get off on is the one in Atlanta, because it's during his presidency.
President Donald Trump is applauding today's decision by the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. The High Court ruled that former presidents are immune from criminal prosecution for their official conduct while in office, but not for unofficial acts. CBS 2's Nicole Skanga joins us live with more on this decision from outside the U.S. Supreme Court. Nicole?
Marie, that's exactly right. Former President Trump hailing this as a big win, but the federal election interference case still trudges on for the former president as justices today weighing in, ruling that unofficial acts by the former president are not shielded by criminal prosecution.
The Supreme Court issued a landmark decision on presidential immunity in a case that directly affects former President Trump. In a 6-3 ruling, the conservative majority divided presidential conduct into 3 categories. Official acts that are part of the president's core constitutional powers, for which the president has absolute immunity. Other official acts outside the president's exclusive authority have presumptive immunity, and there is no immunity for unofficial acts.
On the majority side, they, I think, very legitimately were concerned about the threat of future presidents possibly being prosecuted.
The ruling affects special counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of Trump for his alleged efforts in the overturning of the 2020 election results. The case now goes back to the lower court.
He's going to take a big scissors to the indictment, and he's going to cut out any counts that relate or could be even close to relating to official acts.
In a scathing dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned the ruling insulates the commander-in-chief from criminal prosecution, no matter how he uses his official powers, even if it's for an assassination, military coup, or a bribe.
I think the lens she was coming from is no person is above the law.
Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in his majority opinion that no president is above the law, and the court ultimately rejected Trump's argument that he has absolute immunity unless impeached by the House and convicted by the Senate.
With just over 4 months until the presidential election, Monday's ruling makes it highly unlikely Trump will face trial in the election interference case before then.
The immunity ruling comes on the last day of term for the Supreme Court, about 20 weeks after the former president first sought relief from the high court back in February. Now, the timeline for that election interference case thrown in limbo. But if Trump wins in November, he could order the Department of Justice to throw out the case altogether. At the Supreme Court, Nicole Skanga, I'll send it back.
Yeah, that's what he's banking on. He's banking that he wins the election and throws all the cases out. But again, the Supreme Court did a miscarriage of, I guess, overreach, because they said official acts, you presume incident on some official, so they'll have to divide it up and non-official act, because like Sotomayor said, if Joe Biden right now assassinates Trump for the good of the country, he will not be prosecuted. If President Biden starts a coup right now, he will not be prosecuted for the good of the country. So again, I think they overreached by trying to say that a president should have presidential immunity on official acts, but is that presumed innocent part that kind of gets it. Yeah. So we're going to look up. Where is it? Where is my guy? Where is my guy? Roland Martin. We gotta bring the black media in once a week. I don't know. I hope some people are watching, because this is what we do. Hey, what's happening? Really? Computer's moving slow, so ooh. And
We'll be speaking to the nation tonight regarding today's Supreme Court ruling, a 6-3 decision that says Donald Trump has a lot of immunity from crimes he committed while in office. The nation's highest court decision is a major blow to prosecutors seeking to hold Donald Trump accountable for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. This, of course, fell along partisan lines. It has taken them 6 months to render this decision. And remember, Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned us about rulings that would be coming down. Well, now we have this. Joining me now is Ellie Mistel, Justice Correspondent for The Nation, also Adam Sir, staff writer with The Atlantic. Glad to have both of you here. Ellie, I want to start with you. How bad is this for folks who don't understand the law, who they don't follow this stuff closely? How bad is this decision?
Significantly worse than even I imagined it would be. The crux here is that the president cannot be charged with the crime for acts he commits while he's in the White House. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people, a lot of apologists for the Supreme Court, a lot of centrist Republican-style people telling you that, whoa, they're unofficial acts that he could still be charged for. Yeah, but the key here is that the Supreme Court gave no guidance on the difference between official and unofficial acts. Arguably, everything the president does is going to be ruled as an official act. More importantly, the Supreme Court took away the ability to use evidence of what the president says and does as evidence against the president trying to say that his acts were in fact unofficial. Because if the president talks to the public or talks to his advisors about, for instance, who he would like to assassinate, that communication is also official and thus can't be used to prosecute the president. So there's really no more bounds on what the president can do. It's elevated the office of the presidency to a situation where it is truly above the law. The president now has the ability to commit crimes. And again, I'll end there because that's one of the most important legal points. We're not talking about qualified immunity. We're not talking about immunity from civil liability. We're talking about crimes. We're talking about absolute immunity to commit crimes as long as you say committing that crime is part of my job as president of the United States.
This is Justice Sotomayor. Anthony, go to my iPad. She says the court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interest, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interest of the nation. The president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold onto power, immune. Take a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. Immune, immune, immune. Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office or personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today. That right there sums it all up. This is literally saying this is like if you have a criminal informant and the FBI says, you can commit any crime you want to because you're our informant. Don't worry about it. We're going to get you out of it. You're never going to get arrested. You're never going to even be prosecuted.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, again, there are no bounds around this ruling, which I think is the scariest part here, right? Like you could have look, I thought Trump was going to win at least partially in this case. You could have constructed a ruling that said, well, there are some criminal acts that are clearly so against the nature of lawful proceeding, blah, 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 remanded it back down to the lower court for further review and instruction. The Supreme Court did none of that. The Supreme Court, Roberts, writing for the majority of the Supreme Court, did none of that, and he simply said that anything that is within his obvious constitutional powers, he has absolute immunity for, and anything largely, that could be arguably said to be an official use of power, well, he has presumptive immunity for that. That is an immunity that no other official in this country has, not a cop, not a meter maid, not a congressperson. Only the president is allowed to commit crime and never, ever be prosecuted for it. He's the only person in the country that's now allowed to do that.
So the notion of equal justice under law, that just goes out of the window.
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the United States, we can talk a lot about the history of the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, the framers' intent. But one thing we know that they deliberately were trying not to do was create a king. And here you have the Supreme Court's originalists, the people who supposedly care the most about the history of the Constitution and the framers' intent, saying, actually, if Donald Trump wants to be a king, he can be a king. And I think what we need to understand about this ruling is that we're talking about in the context of Trump trials, him possibly being prosecuted for what he did in the past. But this is really a forward-looking ruling. It's a ruling that says when Donald Trump is president again, he is allowed to go on the crime spree that we, the justices, the conservative justices of the Supreme Court, want him to go on. We will not stand in his way. He can commit any crime he feels like committing because he is the president. That's what this ruling says.
I guess all of these comments here during confirmation hearings don't mean anything. Go to my iPad. Watch this.
I believe that no one is above the law under our system, and that includes the president. The president is fully bound by the law, the Constitution, and statutes. I believe that no one.
That, of course, is John Roberts. He is Samuel Alito.
Above the law. No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law. It has been a particular honor for me to serve on the Court of Appeals for these past 15 years.
Now, that's Sam Alito. Now, guess what? Here is Brett Kavanaugh.
No one's above the law in the United States. That's a foundational principle that I've talked about, coming from Federalist 69, coming from the structure of the Constitution. We're all equal before the law in the United States of America.
Well, we know all three of them were lying because they comprise 3 of the 6, Ellie.
And can I say, let me wrap together this opinion and the other opinions that we saw last week. When you look at the court's calling onto itself the power to rule over executive agencies, when you look at the court's decision in the Chevron case, and you link it up with today's case, what you have is the Supreme Court grabbing final authoritarian power over the rest of government, over both the presidency and Congress, right? Because the whole point of the Supreme Court not telling us what official acts and unofficial acts are, not explaining that difference to us, it means that only the Supreme Court knows. Only the Supreme Court can tell us which acts the president can never be prosecuted for and which acts he can be prosecuted for. So I hear a lot of liberals, a lot of left-leaning people out there today saying, oh, well, Joe Biden can now use this immunity. No, he can't. No, he can't. Because if Joe Biden tried to do the criminal things that Donald Trump did, all of a sudden the Supreme Court would say, oh, no, those were unofficial acts that Joe Biden took, whereas Donald Trump took official acts. See the difference? Because the Supreme Court is making up its own rules as it goes along, the Supreme Court is the only institution with real power in this country. And that is the through line from throughout the Supreme Court term, and certainly from the last week and a half. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell Congress what it can and cannot do. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell the EPA what regulations it can and cannot have. And now only the Supreme Court can decide what a president can and cannot do.
You know, Adam, Republicans love talking about progressive judges legislating from the bench. What we are seeing is, as Ellie said, an absolute power grab by these conservatives, and they are essentially they are doing the bidding of these moneyed interests, these rich interests. You talk about the Chevron case. You talk about now, even if a rule has been enacted, decades ago, they can go back and now sue. I mean, the chaos. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson talked about that. The chaos that we are about to see unleashed on this country, especially if Donald Trump wins, is going to be nothing that we've ever seen before.
I think we have to understand that this ruling and the level of power that the Supreme Court has asserted over the past few weeks, I think fundamentally changes the nature of our government. Whatever we were before those rulings, I think we're becoming something different now. And we will become something even more different if Donald Trump takes power after the November election. And I think fundamentally this is a 19th century worldview that the justices have, which is basically that elites really should not be held accountable for anything. There is
And we are back. We're going to go to Roland Martin, and we're going to talk about the effects of the Supreme Court ruling.
A 6-3 decision that says Donald Trump has a lot of immunity from crimes he committed while in office. The nation's highest court decision is a major blow to prosecutors seeking to hold Donald Trump accountable for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. This, of course, fell along partisan lines. It has taken them 6 months to render this decision. And remember, Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned us about rulings that will be coming down. Well, now we have this. Joining me now is Ellie Mistel, Justice Correspondent for The Nation, also Adam Sir, staff writer with The Atlantic. Glad to have both of you here. Ellie, I want to start with you. How bad is this? For folks who don't understand the law, who they don't follow this stuff closely, how bad is this decision?
Significantly worse than even I imagined it would be. The crux here is that the president cannot be charged with the crime for acts he commits while he's in the White House. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people, a lot of apologists for the Supreme Court, a lot of centrist Republican-style people telling you that, oh, they're unofficial acts that he could still be charged for. Yeah, but the key here is that the Supreme Court gave no guidance on the difference between official and unofficial acts. Arguably, everything the president does is going to be ruled as an official act. More importantly, the Supreme Court took away the ability to use evidence of what the president says and does as evidence against the president trying to say that his acts were in fact unofficial. Because if the president talks to the public or talks to his advisors about, for instance, who he would like to assassinate, that communication is also official and thus can't be used to prosecute the president. So there's really no more bounds on what the president can do. It's elevated the office of the presidency to a situation where it is truly above the law. The president now has the ability to commit crimes. And again, I'll end there because that's one of the most important legal points. We're not talking about qualified immunity. We're not talking about immunity from civil liability. We're talking about crimes. We're talking about absolute immunity to commit crimes as long as you say committing that crime is part of my job as president of the United States.
This is Justice Sotomayor. Anthony, go to my iPad. She says the court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interest, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interest of the nation. The president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold onto power, immune. Take a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. Immune, immune, immune. Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office or personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends. Because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today. That right there sums it all up. This is literally saying this is like if you have a criminal informant and the FBI says, you can commit any crime you want to because you're our informant. Don't worry about it. We're going to get you out of it. You're never going to get arrested. You're never going to even be prosecuted.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are no bounds around this ruling, which I think is the scariest part here, right? Like you could have look, I thought Trump was going to win at least partially in this case. You could have constructed a ruling that said, well, there are some criminal acts that are clearly so against the nature of lawful proceeding, blah, 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 remanded it back down to the lower court for further review and instruction. The Supreme Court did none of that. The Supreme Court, Roberts, writing for the majority in Supreme Court, did none of that, and he simply said that anything that is within his obvious constitutional powers, he has absolute immunity for, and anything largely, that could be arguably said to be an official use of power, well, he has presumptive immunity for that. That is an immunity that no other official in this country has, not a cop, not a meter maid, not a congressperson. Only the president is allowed to commit crime and never, ever be prosecuted for it. He's the only person in the country that's now allowed to do that.
So the notion of equal justice under law, that just goes out of the window.
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the United States, we can talk a lot about the history of the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, the framers' intent. But one thing we know that they deliberately were trying not to do was create a king. And here you have the Supreme Court's originalists, the people who supposedly care the most about the history of the Constitution and the framers' intent, saying, actually, if Donald Trump wants to be a king, he can be a king. And I think what we need to understand about this ruling is that we're talking about in the context of Trump trials, him possibly being prosecuted for what he did in the past. But this is really a forward-looking ruling. It's a ruling that says when Donald Trump is president again, he is allowed to go on the crime spree that we, the justices, the conservative justices of the Supreme Court, want him to go on. We will not stand in his way. He can commit any crime he feels like committing because he is the president. That's what this ruling says.
I guess all of these comments here during confirmation hearings don't mean anything. Go to my iPad. Watch this.
I believe that no one is above the law under our system, and that includes the president. The president is fully bound by the law, the Constitution, and statutes. I believe that no one is above the law.
That, of course, is John Roberts. Here's Samuel Alito.
Above the law. No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law. It has been a particular honor for me to serve on the Court of Appeals for these past 15 years.
Now, that's Sam Alito. Now, guess what? Here is Brett Kavanaugh.
No one's above the law in the United States. That's a foundational principle that I've talked about, coming from Federalist 69, coming from the structure of the Constitution. We're all equal before the law in the United States of America.
Well, we know all three of them were lying because they comprised 3 of the 6, Ellie.
And can I say, let me wrap together this opinion and the other opinions that we saw last week. When you look at the court's calling onto itself the power to rule over executive agencies, when you look at the court's decision in the Chevron case, and you link it up with today's case, what you have is the Supreme Court grabbing final authoritarian power over the rest of government, over both the presidency and Congress, right? Because the whole point of the Supreme Court not telling us what official acts and unofficial acts are, not explaining that difference to us, it means that only the Supreme Court knows. Only the Supreme Court can tell us which acts the president can never be prosecuted for and which acts he can be prosecuted for. So I hear a lot of liberals, a lot of left-leaning people out there today saying, oh, well, Joe Biden can now use this immunity. No, he can't. No, he can't. Because if Joe Biden tried to do the criminal things that Donald Trump did, all of a sudden the Supreme Court would say, oh, no, those were unofficial acts that Joe Biden took, whereas Donald Trump took official acts. See the difference? Because the Supreme Court is making up its own rules as it goes along, the Supreme Court is the only institution with real power in this country. And that is the through line from throughout the Supreme Court term, and certainly from the last week and a half. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell Congress what it can and cannot do. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell the EPA what regulations it can and cannot have. And now only the Supreme Court can decide what a president can and cannot do.
You know, Adam, Republicans love talking about progressive judges legislating from the bench. What we are seeing is, as Ellie said, an absolute power grab by these conservatives. And they are essentially, they are doing the bidding of these moneyed interests, these rich interests. You talk about the Chevron case. You talk about now, even if a rule has been enacted decades ago, they can go back and now sue. I mean, the chaos, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson talked about that, the chaos that we are about to see unleashed on this country, especially if Donald Trump wins, is going to be nothing that we've ever seen before.
I think we have to understand that this ruling and the level of power that the Supreme Court has asserted over the past few weeks, I think fundamentally changes the nature of our government. Whatever we were before those rulings, I think we're becoming something different now, and we will become something even more different if Donald Trump takes power after the November election. I think fundamentally this is a 19th century worldview that the justices have, which is basically that elites really should not be held accountable for anything. There is a certain level of immunity that if you are a conservative elite, whether that's in business or in government, you simply are not bound by the law the way that other people are. And so I think it's important to go back to those statements that they said, well, nobody is above the law. They're actually creating classes of people who are above the law, and those people are all their political allies.
Of course, they're setting up a group.
Ellie, what people have to understand, again, Sotomayor talked about, hopefully a president doesn't go there. Let's be real clear. Donald Trump has already went there. He knows no bottom. There's no such thing as guardrails. Justice John Roberts, in his opinion, literally said that because the president is pursuing his duties to uphold the law, he can inquire about investigations of the Department of Justice when we've operated as if there's sort of this wall between the executive branch and the DOJ so they can maintain their independence. Roberts has just said, oh, the hell with that. The president can call the attorney general, give me an update on this case, involving him, involving a family member, involving an administration official. That's what John Roberts is saying.
Yeah, he's obliterated the separation, the wall of separation that's supposed to exist between the president and the Justice Department. Democrats are well aware that Joe Biden does not call Merrick Garland up and tell Merrick Garland what to do. But that separation, that's out the window. If Trump gets back in, as he was already doing with Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions and the toilet bowl salesman man, whoever he puts in as Attorney General next, be it Stephen Miller or Mike Davis or some other kind of unreconstructed racist that Trump finds out of 1965 Alabama, it will be a situation where Trump can call that attorney general up every day and instruct him who to prosecute, who to let off. That's, again, the kind of massive power that the president has accrued to himself under this ruling. And to go back to Adam's point, when you talk about the class of elites that Adam is absolutely right that the Supreme Court is creating, let's also not forget the earlier decision last week where the Supreme Court made it okay for people to take bribes as long as they're called gratuities or tips after the fact. It's completely legal now for public officials to take bribes so they can get paid for a decision that helps out their powerful friends, just like this one today. It's a all hands on deck reformation.
All right. We are getting to the destruction of the United States as we know it. So, again, please go out and vote, because this power grab that they're going for, they might get it because 9 justices. There's 9 justices. 2 are going to retire. These 2. 9 justices. So that leaves 7. 4 conservative, 3 liberal. If Trump gets in, it goes back to 6-3. But this is what we want. We want Kamala Harris or Biden in office to swing the votes this way so we can have a 5-4 liberal majority. If we win this election, guaranteed to get fired. At least 5 judges. 5. They can stall all they want, but it's not going to happen. All right, so I need everyone to pay attention so we can go out and go ahead and take back the Supreme Court, take back the country. So all right, we're going to go to another
Mark, we are sitting here, I think you and I are probably in the same position that everybody else is, reeling from this Supreme Court decision, basically effectively granting Donald Trump immunity, if not also the delay that he was seeking in this trial. Right off the top here, what's the fix? Could Congress pass a law stating that a president doesn't have immunity? And if so, would that law supersede this Supreme Court ruling? Or could the justices have the opportunity to discard it?
I don't think that there's an easy fix to this. I mean, look, the Supreme Court here knew exactly what it was doing. You know, people who are commenting and saying, oh, the Supreme Court is naive about the realities of Donald Trump. No. The Supreme Court's not naive about the realities of Donald Trump. The Supreme Court knew exactly what they were doing, both with respect to impacting the past cases, the cases that are pending, but also what it means if Donald Trump wins again, right? Donald Trump is saying he will be a dictator for a day. Donald Trump is saying that he will exact retribution. Donald Trump is working with Project 2025 and others to allow him to take over the entire executive branch to mete out retribution through frivolous criminal prosecutions and investigations. So do I think that this could be fixed by Congress passing a law? No. Why? Because the Supreme Court is in on it. You know, the Supreme Court did this because this was the result they wanted. And it's about time that we look in the mirror, and rather than seeing a bunch of Harvard and Yale educated people who drink wine at cocktail parties and eat crudité and send their kids to the same prep schools that liberals do and think that they have the same value system, to realize they don't have the same value system. This is what they intended to do, and I am at a loss for words as to how this gets fixed, because I don't think if Congress passed a law saying, look, the made-up immunity that the Supreme Court created, it goes away, I think the Supreme Court would say, no, you can't do that. We think that this is a matter of constitutional law, and that trumps your statute.
And is that how it works? Like, would the Supreme Court have the ability to interpret a law that Congress passed that would expressly forbid a president from having presidential immunity? Could the Supreme Court then overturn a law that Congress passes?
Sure. I mean, the Supreme Court does strike down laws if they're unconstitutional. And they would say that this is a matter of constitutional law. And, that's just the way it is. Right. And, you get it, your incredulousness gets at kind of the real point here, which is you are left saying, but wouldn't the Supreme Court in that circumstance, realize the enormity of what they would be doing there? Right? They would be overturning the will of the Congress to limit the ability of a president to, among other things, assassinate their political opponents and escape criminal liability. But if one thing we learned from Dobbs and all of the cases afterwards, that is not for the conservatives, that is a feature, not a flaw.
Right. And I think they do these things knowing that, for all those people, and this is going to lead into my next question about what Biden can do, but for all these people who say, well, now Biden has carte blanche to do X, Y, and Z, they understand the asymmetry between the two parties. They understand that even though a president could do something right now by virtue of this decision, that a Democratic president just wouldn't. A Democratic president just wouldn't do the same things that someone like Donald Trump would avail himself of. And so I think that's their safety valve in all of this.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a piece for Democracy Docket a few weeks back about election denialism called The Asymmetry of Election Denialism, right? Which is exactly this, is that, Democrats are not going to engage in mass voter suppression. Right. We are not going to adopt an election denier movement. And that gives the other side a lot of flexibility. Well, boy, is that showing itself out here, right? Because like you said, Joe Biden is not going to assassinate his political opponents. Right. Joe Biden is not going to commit crimes in office, and no Democratic president, as you point out, would do that. And I'm not even sure every Republican president would do it, but sitting on their doorstep, sitting on their doorstep are both criminal cases where a Republican president did it, and that same person, the Republican nominee, running neck and neck in the polls to potentially do it again next year.
Right. To that point, then, what could Biden do as the result of this ruling, and what should Biden do as the result of this ruling?
Look, I think that all of the delay and hand-wringing that we have seen, and I'm not saying just from President Biden, but I think he's been, because he's an institutionalist, I think he has been slow on this, and the White House has, but all of the hand-wringing about judicial reform just has to end.
Right.
I mean, if you didn't have the wake-up call that the Supreme Court needs to be reformed in its ethics, in the way in which they choose cases, and the way in which the opinions are handed down, the way in which they have aggregated their own power. I mean, it's not just this case. Remember, a few days ago we were talking about another case where they gave a pass to January 6th insurrectionists. Right, Fisher, and a few months ago we were talking about a case in which they told Colorado they couldn't kick Trump off the ballot under the 14th Amendment as an insurrectionist. This is a pattern. This is not a one-off case. And so, we need to have a serious conversation as a country. Congress needs to have a serious conversation. The White House needs to have a serious conversation. And we need to have a campaign that talks about not just democracy being on the ballot, but also court reform being on the ballot.
Well, you've been beating this drum to your credit and to the credit of Democracy Docket, and I think that's exactly the kind of outlets, the kind of people that need to be lifted up. So for those watching right now, if you are not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, it's the free news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections. Please make sure to sign up, because this is the exact kind of thing that we should be lifting up in light of what we just saw in the court. You had just mentioned Section 3 of the 14th Amendment case. Can you help me reconcile here how the Supreme Court could create this idea of presidential immunity for committing criminal activity totally out of whole cloth? This is something that is not in the Constitution, and in fact, the immunity for civil prosecution is, which would by negative inference suggest that actually the Constitution prohibits immunity for criminal prosecution, and yet disregarded the plain text of the Constitution as it relates to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which very clearly states that an official is disqualified from running for office again if they engage in insurrection. Can you help me explain the dichotomy between these two things?
Yeah, originalism and textualism has been replaced by vibism. Right? This is just like conservative vibes. They're just like vibing that Donald Trump shouldn't be kicked off the ballot, and they're vibing that Donald Trump should have immunity. But the fact is, they are both similar cases in that in one instance, textualism and originalism would have kicked Donald Trump off the ballot, and in another case, it would not have given immunity to presidents. Right. As you point out, there is in the U.S. Constitution a clear provision of immunity to members of the legislative branch. It's called speech and debate immunity. There is not immunity anywhere to be found in the Constitution for the President of the United States. And they created an immunity that is not just what Donald Trump wanted, but Donald Trump wanted and then some. They gave him more in some senses that they wanted. And they have put in serious jeopardy, not just the case in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, the Georgia case about January 6th. Lord knows in Florida, he doesn't even need immunity there. He's just got...
To the point of Florida, Clarence Thomas, apropos of nothing, slipped in this little clause that I'm going to read to you right now. He said, in this case, the Attorney General purported to appoint a private citizen as special counsel to prosecute a former president on behalf of the United States, but I am not sure that any office for the special counsel has been established by law as the Constitution requires. So that's just a little nugget for Judge Cannon, who is right now litigating and adjudicating this issue of whether or not a special counsel can even prosecute this case, as she's deciding whether or not to dismiss it. And Clarence Thomas offered a little nugget to say, hey, Judge Cannon, if you dismiss this and it makes its way to the Supreme Court, you got at least one vote in your corner.
Oh, at least. I mean, come on. He's got more than one vote in his corner. I think we all know. But absolutely. And so, this will have a cascading effect regarding a number of the Donald Trump cases. And when you take it in conjunction with the Fisher case, the January 6th insurrection case, people say, well, this is only immunity for Donald Trump, but not the people who he'd ordered to do it. Of course, he has the pardon power, and he has been clear that he will use the pardon power to achieve a political end, and he can't be prosecuted for that, we now know.
Right.
And so what is being created is, through all of these decisions, is a culture a culture that the MAGA movement is going to see and is going to experience, that they can be lawless, they can be brazen, and they will get away with it. And, 4 months from the next election and 4.5 months from the next set of litigation that Donald Trump will bring to try to overturn the election, and 5 or 6 months away from the next January 6th, we should all be worried about that.
I can feel the blood pressures rising among all of our viewers on the other side of these screens. So I have to ask this question right now, given the sheer amount of despair that I'm sure people are feeling right now, that I'm sure you and I are feeling right now. What's your message to people today? What's the message you want to send them off with? What could we do moving forward?
Look, don't despair. I mean, this is the time to fight back. I mean, despair doesn't get you anywhere. Despair doesn't help save democracy, right? We all need to be more determined than ever to protect democracy. And that starts with making sure you are registered to vote, your friends and family are registered to vote, that you haven't been kicked off the ballot by the right-wing vote suppressors. And then make sure you vote, and you vote for Democrats up and down the ballot from top to absolute bottom. Make sure you know the issues. If there is a ballot initiative in your state, make sure you know about them. If you're in a state with a pro-choice ballot initiative, make sure you vote for that. And everyone needs to speak out. This is not the time to bury your head in the sand. This is the time to speak out loudly in your town square. Take to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Go to your friends, your family. Stand on the street corner if you have to, and tell them that we need to fight for our democracy.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. For those watching right now.
Yeah, please come out and vote. Don't think that somebody else is going to do it. Please come out and vote. Okay, moving to our next one. Gonna go to vote. Hit me with it.
Howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about the effects of the Supreme Court decision on the Biden administration. Because there's a lot of talk about what Biden can do now because of his newfound immunity, which is being confused with authority. There's a lot of conversation, and a lot of it's a joke, and the joke is fine, about, let's just call it drastic actions that King Biden might undertake if he truly embraced Dark Brandon and started his villain arc. Here's the thing. The Supreme Court decision provides immunity for actions, not authority. One of the first rules of command is never give an order that won't be obeyed. Sure, Biden could, in theory, order these drastic actions, but that doesn't actually give him the authority to do it, which means those orders may not be followed by the people under him. Why? And this is an important distinction. Biden staffed his administration with people who actually respect the U.S. Constitution. So odds are they're not going to follow it. They wouldn't follow the order. He has immunity, but not authority. The concern arises if you get a president that staffs with people who will just do whatever he says. That's the concern. One of the other concerns about this is that it distracts from the reality. There is no magic scenario that makes this go away. There's no savior.
Nope.
It's you. It's you. This has to be defeated at the ballot box. That's where it has to be stopped. There isn't a magical procedural motion or anything like that that is going to alter that. The United States, the type of representative democracy that exists in this republic, requires advanced citizenship if it is to continue. It has to be defeated at the ballot box. Even AOC's move. She's saying she's going to file articles of impeachment. I have questions about it, but as far as it being effective, it won't be unless there is a defeat of authoritarianism at the ballot box. Let's say she files the articles of impeachment and it makes it through, and then it goes through the Senate, and some Supreme Court justices get removed. If the American people do not show up at the ballot box, well, Trump might just reappoint them.
True.
There isn't a scenario that doesn't require your participation on voting day. It's the reality of it. So, I get that most people are joking. Just don't let the joke become something that is seen as a realistic possibility, because that's not going to alter this. It's going to be you. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
Yeah, man, we need y'all to come out and vote. Don't let this shit happen where we have a dictatorship. So, because I really don't feel like the plan is to have America, go to shit after 270 something years. Too old for that. All right, so let's go back to my guy, Bo.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about Trump and Biden and polling and Mo and a message from somebody who says they're a pollster. And we're going to go over some information. If you have missed it, I have a lot of skepticism when it comes to a lot of polling that is going on right now because of how it has lined up with the actual results during the primaries. It definitely seems to be skewed. Okay, so here's the message. I'm a pollster with name of a polling organization that you have heard of. It is worth noting that I don't actually know this person. They could completely be making that up. But the points that are made here, they're worth talking about. I watch every video about polling you put out, waiting for you to say something, and you haven't. I, like you, think polling is skewing a certain way, but that's not actually what you need to talk about. I'm fully prepared for the snarky comment about telling you how to use your platform. You need to explain Mo. I can tell you're factoring it in, but you haven't mentioned it in any of this election season's videos. And then P.S. You say you don't know exactly why the polls are skewed. Pro tip, we all use census data. That gets really interesting. Okay, so what is Mo? And in this message, it is capital M, lowercase o, lowercase e. So I'm going to assume that was supposed to be all caps in that case. Love autocorrect. Mo, margin of error. And a lot of people think they understand what that means, but they may not. right now you have a whole bunch of people freaking out over what amounts to a 2.5, 3-point swing in a poll that has a 3-point margin of error. And based on that, you're thinking, okay, so it's in the margin of error. It really doesn't mean anything. Yeah, that's true. That number comes from what they can expect to occur if they were to repeat that survey 100 times. 95% of the time, they would get an answer within the margin of error. However, the margin of error is both ways. So if it's a margin of error of 3, well, it's really 6. So the 2.5-point swing, that's completely consistent with the previous poll. Okay, so we're going to talk about the polls that are interesting. Sometimes you get polls that are from the same respondents. They poll the exact same people again. Those are interesting because they are more likely to actually show a swing. However, if somebody is not set in their vote enough to swing from week to week, odds are something will happen the week before the election that might alter their vote. So while they are interesting, they are not really great at being able to forecast out from. So these are problems on the math side of the polling. You also have a bunch of other issues that can arise, is how they ask the questions, their samples, and how they're weighted, and all of that stuff. The question is, obviously, if this is how it works, why don't news outlets tell you that? Because then they can't run headlines making a big deal out of a 1-point swing. It's bad for ad revenue. Okay. Now let's go to the idea of census data being used from 2020, when there was the whole public health thing going on. A lot of evaluations have determined that some groups were significantly undercounted. Some demographics were significantly undercounted. The interesting part about that is they are demographics that would tend to vote the opposite way of how the polling appears to be skewing. It's interesting. Is that what's happening? There's no way for me to prove that. Like, even with like unlimited resources, there's no way for me to prove that. But it's interesting. And I like it more than non-response bias because I have a bias against non-response bias. I just don't think that's a good answer. So this is information that somebody who says they're in that field feels you should know. And yeah, it is incredibly useful, and it is very grounding when you see these small shifts in the polls that the media is trying to cast as a major development. It's also noting that you actually have to pay attention to the margin of error, because 3% is probably the norm, but I've seen some go as high as 5 or 6, which realistically, 5 or 6 in either direction, I mean, that's not really helpful. The other thing to keep in mind as far as media coverage, U.S. politics today, especially when you're talking about a presidential election, is so polarized. Pretty much any poll is going to come out within that margin of error. And again, it doesn't make for good TV. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
All right. So again, please come out and vote. Please vote. Please vote. Okay, we're going to go to this tab for this reactions after Biden's failed, well, not failed, but debacle at the debate.
To move forward with his campaign. On the Earl Ingram show, which is out of Wisconsin, he stressed how important black voters are to this election.
The vote of the black community matters intensely. Look, it make up a significant portion of the American population. Who's going to represent you except folks like me?
And when talking about last week's debate, the president admitted to the radio program The Source he had a bad night.
Is there any reason for the American people to be concerned?
No, I had a bad debate.
Yeah.
I had a bad debate. But 90 minutes on stage does not erase what I've done for 3.5 years. Proud of the record, and we just got to keep moving.
Well, joining me now is the host of The Source, that radio program, Andrea Lawful Sanders. It's great to have you with us this morning. Look, you got right in there with the president in this interview, which aired this morning. What are you hearing from your listeners in reaction to what the president told you?
I am so glad. First of all, thank you for having me on this morning on your show. It is an honor. I am so happy that that was the first question that you asked, because right after the interview aired at 6 o'clock this morning, I began getting comments like, "We just saved democracy. You were patient, you were kind, you allowed us to speak." And we understood what he was saying amidst the noise that we had been hearing about the fact that he was too old and it was time for him to retire and give it to someone else. And so I was proud of that. I was proud that WRD was chosen to be a part of this conversation so that people could get a clearer sense of what he was discussing and why he wanted to stay as the presumptive nominee for Democratic President of the United States of America.
You told my colleague Laura Coates that you were a little concerned in the wake of the debate. I think, were your listeners as concerned?
It was interesting because the listeners, as we were concerned, myself, Joanne Bell, James Peterson, and Niall Glass, who was 24 years old, we found someone who was much younger who was willing to have the conversation with us. As we were beginning to feel concerned, the listeners said, and they were typing away as we were talking, they said, "I don't care if he's walking with a cane. I'm voting for Joe Biden. I am watching my freedom slipping away." And at that point, the Supreme Court had not yet ruled on all the things that they'd come down with a day later. And that even solidified it even more for them, that they would rather vote for Joe Biden than Donald Trump. So I was so heartened by that. I have been in many living rooms having this conversation over the last few months. And I said to the people who were, waffling, "Oh my God, this doesn't look good, et cetera, et cetera." I said, you've been listening to two men. Both of them are older than we would have liked them to be. But of the two men that you are listening to, who was the one that would make more sense for the United States of America? Who was the one that would work with the people? Who was the one that has the data, the proven policies that would give us what we needed as a country to move forward? We're already so fractured from what happened on January 6, 2021. This has only frightened the people more. And so many of my friends have gotten passports and visas and gone on to other places to live as a direct result, black and white, right? And so we have to create a space of calm in our country, bring it back to center, and find ways for us to work together again.
When you got this call, was it the White House or the campaign that reached out and said, "We'd love for you to speak with the president"?
Both. The White House and the campaign. And they called and said, "We've been listening to you. We want to give you this opportunity." And I tell people all the time, when you do your work and do it well and keep your head down, the people will notice. You don't have to draw attention to yourself. And so on WURD Radio, which is a small station, only one of four that is owned black media stations in the country, I said to Sarah Lomax, who is the owner, and it's independently operated, I said to her in 2019, "Sarah, the ultimate goal is to get people to work together, to get our folks to understand the importance of what it is to be black in our community and to take on the stories that matter most to us in a time where we can only get 30 seconds on another radio station or 15 seconds on air at a television station. We're able to delve a little deeper. So it is an honor When I tell you it is an honor for us to have been chosen, it truly was.
And then that gives you the opportunity too to express what your listeners are saying and feeling, the questions that they have. Look, the interview with you, I also spoke with Earl Ingram out of Wisconsin. He did an interview yesterday as well. These are two important places for President Biden, of course, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. We know he's going to be making trips there. There is so much talk about whether the president not only can win this election, but whether he can serve, whether he is fit to serve another 4 years. Those questions are out there. Based on your conversation with him, do you believe he is?
I believe he is fit, but I also want to remind people that he's the face, the figurehead as president of the United States. He has a whole staff around him that has created so many changes over the last 3 years. Now, I'm not telling people who to vote for one way or the other. I just want them to take a look and see what's happening on either side of the aisle and decide which would be best for their life, their well-being, and their freedoms. So people, as I'm talking to them, are saying things to me like, Andrea, I don't care if they have to roll him in a wheelchair. I'm voting for Joe Biden. I don't care. We are seeing our freedoms taken away as Black people.
With a Black woman on TV, I tell you, boy, Caribbean Black woman win you over.
Black wealth grew 60% since the COVID. He says we have to do more. He's talked about, student debt relief. He's talked about pouring money into creating spaces for Black-owned businesses so that we can grow our wealth. He's talked about, putting $16 billion into HBCUs. The man is one of the few people, and that includes Barack Obama, our former President Barack Obama, who has just really honed in and focused in on people of color in this country. And then he went further to create spaces where we have the most Black justices, the Black judges, federal judges. He's the only president that's created that many Black judges in the country. So we have to look at his record, right? Not just look at his frailty. And as someone who's from the island of Jamaica, I tell people all the time, we have to stop discarding our elderly. Right? They've not lost their minds. They've not done, they've worked so hard
the
to
Black
get to where they
Caribbean woman on
are.
TV show
And yes, we
over.
slow down as we get older, and our bodies move a little slower. But we tend to be moved by what we see people doing, how charismatic they are, and not by the truths or untruths we hear.
Andrea Lawful Sanders, really.
Like I said, put a Black Caribbean woman on TV and then win you over. Again, in my opinion, this is how the plan is going to work. Joe Biden wins the presidency. Kamala Harris takes over a year or 2 years in. She's the first Black, Indian, and Caribbean female president. And then it's going to be between her and Gavin Newsom in 2028. I think 2028, Gavin Newsom wins. That's in my opinion. So please don't forget to go out and vote, because we need everyone to come out and vote. Everyone to come out and vote. Okay, let's talk about Biden, but we're going to talk about this guy. The reason we are in an inflation is because of that guy. Check it out.
On January 6th, we were respected all over the world. They're taking Black jobs. Put 3 great Supreme Court justices on the court, and they happened to vote in favor of killing Roe v. Wade. It's been a great thing. My retribution is going to be success.
President Biden's campaign was up with that new digital ad on social media one day after the debate, after Biden largely failed to fact-check Trump in real time on Thursday night. Joining us now to take up that mantle is former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner and his famous charts. Let's start, Steve, with Donald Trump's claim about Joe Biden's record on jobs. Take a look.
The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Steve Ratner, what's the reality?
Yeah, Mika, look, just to set the stage, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, rather, committed more than 30 lies during the campaign. Fact check. I don't know how to fact check. I didn't sleep with a porn star, so we picked some other things to talk about. And this is a good place to start. This is a good place to start, which is jobs. And so this notion that the only jobs Joe Biden created were so-called bounce-back jobs is ridiculous. So let me show it to you as clearly as I know how to do. So here are the job numbers before the pandemic. We had over 150 million jobs. The pandemic hit. Obviously, we lost a lot of jobs. We started coming back. And you can see that in June of 2022, so a year and a half into President Biden's term, we basically got back to the pre-pandemic level. So these are, you want to call these bounce-back jobs, you can call these bounce-back jobs. But here's what happened after June of 2022. We added 6.2 million jobs to this economy. And so these are jobs that were created unambiguously under Joe Biden's watch. And here's something even more interesting, which is the job creation of both President Biden and Donald Trump making the right adjustments for COVID. If you take out the impact of COVID, Donald Trump created 182,000 jobs a month on average. If you do the same thing for Biden, take out COVID, he created 276,000 jobs per month, so way more jobs per month than Donald Trump created. And by the way, more than were created under President Clinton, President Obama, and so forth. It's one of the strongest job creation records in history.
So there's also Trump's claim about the largest tax cut in history. Take a look at what he said.
What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs, but he's putting a lot of those regulations back on.
And Steve, what are the actual facts?
The actual facts is that Donald Trump's tax cut, sorry, I keep confusing. Donald Trump's tax cut is nowhere near as large, the largest in history. And you can see here some of the largest tax cuts in history. The famous Ronald Reagan tax cut of 1981. President Obama had 2 tax cuts during his watch. This tax cut, which actually was passed in '64, we call it the Kennedy tax cut because he was trying for it. And here's President Trump all the way down here, Donald Trump all the way down here with the TCJA at 0.6% measured against GDP, which is the proper way to measure tax cuts. And then he talks about how he was ready to start paying down the debt. This is completely laughable. The deficit was actually going up even before COVID hit because of Donald Trump's tax cut. And so when you put it all together, Donald Trump added $4.8 trillion of non-COVID, again, we're trying to adjust for COVID, $4.8 trillion of non-COVID debt to our national debt. Joe Biden has added $2.2 trillion of non-COVID debt to our national debt in roughly the same period of time. And so the deficit and debt record between these two guys is, again, not even close.
And one more thing, there were many, but we'll just do these. Donald Trump also had this to say about crime connected to immigration. Take a listen.
He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime. I call it Biden migrant crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before.
Steve, what's the reality about the rat's nest that we are living in?
You know, Trump's ability to lie with a completely straight face and to say things that just are absolutely factually inaccurate without even blinking is quite amazing. So let's talk about overall crime first. First of all, and I'm using violent crime here as a proxy, but you'd see similar things at other kinds of crime. First of all, crime really didn't even go down much under President Trump. It went down a little bit, it went up. You can say this was COVID, but basically no change in crime. Under President Biden, here's what's happened to violent crime. It's gone from 398 per 100,000 people, the rate of crime, down 26%, 294. This is an extrapolation of what this year will look like if present trends continue. A huge drop in crime this year. And so the record on crime overall between these two guys, again, isn't even close. So he's talking also about migrant crime. Let's talk about migrant crime, because this is something most people don't appreciate, which is that the rate of crime committed by both legal immigrants and undocumented immigrants is actually lower than that of U.S.-born citizens. So here is the crime rate for violent crime, a bit over 200. For U.S.-born citizens, it drops down for legal immigrants, and if you're an undocumented immigrant, you actually have one of the lowest crime rates. And among the reason for that is not that surprising in a way. If you're an undocumented immigrant, you don't want to get deported. You're pretty unlikely to commit a crime because that's not going to lead to a great outcome for you. But in any event, you see the same trends in property crime and in drug violations. Immigrants who come here, whether they're documented or whether undocumented, commit crimes at a lower rate than native-born Americans. That has been studied many times. This is a Texas study. You can find it anywhere else in the data. Those are the facts.
Yep. Biden did have a bad debate. All right. Well, right now we're gonna pause on the election stuff, and we're gonna go to Florida, the place I used to live, and I will go back because they do shit like this.
Tonight, CBS News Miami investigates rising rents at an affordable housing community for senior citizens. The grand opening of Tucker Tower in March attracted attention and celebration from community leaders. The 120-unit building is designed to assist seniors.
Residents approached us 2 weeks ago concerned about rent increases already in the middle of their lease. The rent is due today, and CBS News Miami's Joe Gorcho spent the last week digging into this case. Joe?
Lauren Elliott, I can tell you, residents were genuinely panicked coming into July 1st. The rent, as you said, due today. Tucker Tower Management posted a flyer on April 30th announcing an increase in rent starting today, in some cases by as much as $138 a month. Some residents feared being unable to stay after moving in just a few months ago.
My health is not good. I'm not sleeping. I'm on the verge of crying right now.
Georgina Millette is restless but motivated.
I love living here, and what is done is not fair.
Millette worried about a flyer revealing a rent increase mid-lease. It pointed to a section of her lease contract for units participating in government-regulated affordable housing programs. The provision states that if the area median gross income changes, the owner may, at its sole discretion, increase the rent. The Housing Trust Group, which owns and operates Tucker Tower, provided a 60-day notice of the rent hike. Were you aware of the provision that says at their sole discretion they can raise your rent?
Absolutely not, and that is on me, because I was so desperate to get into the building.
Millette's neighbor, showing us her rental agreement, also felt left in the dark.
Since that come, the only thing I think is how can I stretch the $2,000 that I receive a month to afford the increase.
They are each expected to pay over $100 more monthly than their original lease agreement. I wrote to the Housing Trust Group, who responded through a PR firm. I asked why they chose to increase the rent. In part, they tell us the increase must happen on July 1st, regardless of someone's lease start date, because they claim they have no flexibility outside federal government regulations.
I felt it was unjust. I hold firm that the residents should win in this issue.
District 9 Commissioner Keon McGee celebrated Tucker Tower's grand opening on March 4th. His smile faded when residents told him about the increase. McGee says he spent nearly 2 months examining contracts and seeing how his office could help resolve the issue. He spoke with HTG representatives Monday morning, seeking a resolution for Tucker Tower residents.
The residents will not see an increase in their rent. A letter will be sent out to them notifying them of such.
And McGee says there's another call planned for tomorrow to finalize details with HTG. Part of the discussion will include that provision, giving HTG the discretion during every lease term to raise rates based on new available AMIs. For now, residents were tearful today when I spoke with them and thankful that the rent rate will stay the same for the remainder of their lease agreement.
Okay. All right. So they went to the TV and they got the rent the same, but guess what? That's the old bait and switch shit where next year, the next time they come out for the new lease is going to be doubled. That's all it is. It's going to be doubled in 2024, 25, whichever year it is, 2025. Yep, that's all it's going to be. All right, let's stick with Florida. Let's see what's happening with Ted Cruz. We got a Ted Cruz out, people. You people in Texas, one job. Actually, two jobs. Get him out.
Weird is happening in the state of Texas. Democrats, for many years, I mean, honestly, for a decade or more now, I've been covering politics for 20 years, and Democrats always tell us every election cycle, oh boy, this is going to be the one where we finally turn Texas blue. And then, of course, Democrats have not won a statewide race in Texas in years and years and years and years. But don't worry, the next time we're totally going to turn Texas blue. You know, I'm almost tired of hearing that talking point. I'm tired of reading the stories about how Democrats, this is your year for Texas. And then new polls came out in Ted Cruz's re-election race. At the beginning of the month of June, Ted Cruz had an 11-point lead over his Democratic opponent, Colin Allred. That was at the beginning of the month, an 11-point lead to begin the month of June. To end the month of June, that lead among likely voters had fallen to 3 points, within the margin of error for the poll, which technically results in a statistical tie. An 11-point lead for Ted Cruz in his state of Texas, where he's already won 2 Senate races, an 11-point lead evaporated in a month. And the news actually gets even worse for Ted Cruz because only 40% of the people surveyed, even though he's winning in the survey, 40% said they either strongly or somewhat approve of him, whereas 50% have a very or somewhat negative view of Ted Cruz. So half the state, half the people in the poll say, we don't like this guy. I do not like him. Only 40% say, yeah, I like him. Pretty good dude. It gets even worse for Ted Cruz. Independents are the ones who are up for grabs in the state of Texas. The Republicans are pretty much unilaterally supporting Ted Cruz. Democrats, they're all in for Allred. But independents, 40% of independents say, we haven't made up our mind yet. We don't know. And the reason is because most of them say we know who Ted Cruz is, but we don't know who Allred is. We need more information about Allred so that we can make up our minds. So they are open to the idea of voting for the Democrat. And if you get 40% of the independents in the state of Texas, you just won your race, folks. Or that remaining 40%, I should say. So Texas, Ted Cruz's seat may be up for grabs. This might actually be something the Democrats can pull off. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath on it. I would love to give you happy thoughts and leave you feeling optimistic about what's going on. But again, I've been through this for 20 years, and I see it every election cycle where there's a statewide seat available in Texas, and it hasn't happened yet. But things change. And what changed since the last election in Texas? Well, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and of course, Texas enacted their very strict abortion ban in the state. You have also had tragedies take place in the state. You've had the book bans. You've had all sorts of things going on. Book bans. And that could be enough to swing the state of Texas, even just by 1 or 2 points, to where Allred can swoop in and take away Ted Cruz's seat. That would be a miracle if it could happen. And right now, the polls are telling us it could happen. Here's another thing from the poll, too, that's actually rather interesting. Trump only has a 6-point lead over Biden in Texas. His lead is shrinking in Texas. Now, do I think Donald Trump's going to lose the state of Texas in November? Absolutely not.
I think he might.
But is there a chance that Ted Cruz may be on his last leg in the Senate? Well, if this new poll is to be believed, that's absolutely a real possibility. Hey, everybody. I don't know if you've noticed this, but we...
Yep. So, Texas, tell a friend to tell a friend that Ted Cruz might be out again. Remember, a lot of people moved from California to Texas. That influx of independent Democratic vote might turn it purple. You never know. So, to my people in Texas, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, vote for the other guy. All right. Let's move on to Trump and Jeffrey Epstein? No. Did he know Jeffrey Epstein? He was on the ship, on his plane, but check it out.
And again, and again, and again, in the new document dump that just took place of the grand jury documents relating to criminal proceedings against Jeffrey Epstein. You'll recall back in February, the Florida legislature enacted a law, it was signed into law rather, by Governor DeSantis to release the criminal grand jury files of Epstein. Circuit Judge Luis Delgado ordered the 16-year-old documents released, writing that details in the record will be outrageous for decent people. Nearly 200 pages of documents have been released containing details of Epstein's crimes, including firsthand accounts from victims and specifics about payoffs to underage victims. And take a look whose name appears over and over and over again in the call log. As one commentator wrote, prior to marrying Melania in January 2005, Trump was calling Jeffrey Epstein in 2004 on the regular. We now have the phone messages between Epstein and Donald Trump, the phone message log. That is, and this is in connection with the West Palm Beach indictment of Epstein that was released on Monday. His messages are in between girls calling to confirm massage appointments and messages from the disgraced modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel. It should be noted that Jean-Luc died by way of suicide in prison in 2022. Just take a look right here. Of the message logs right here. And you'll see, for example, Donald Trump's name appearing again and again and again. And we see it over and over right there. Around this time period, we are also aware from some reporting around that time, and actually in about 2019, 2020 as well, that Donald Trump was looking at real estate property with Epstein as well in the West Palm Beach area. And this is not surprising. They were very, very close friends. Donald Trump had remarked about Epstein in an interview with New York Magazine in 2002 that he thought Epstein was, quote, a terrific guy, and noted his penchant for pursuing women on the younger side. A direct quote from Donald Trump. This is undisputed. Trump said of Epstein in 2002, I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. Trump told New York Magazine, he's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them on the younger side. We know already that Donald Trump was also on Epstein's flight logs at least 7 times. Here are the receipts straight from the court records. In the Ghislaine Maxwell case, we see Trump's name over and over again. Also, we know from deposition testimony from the women that were trafficked by Epstein that he would bring them to Trump properties. For example, here's a deposition, page 78, of a woman who was trafficked, and she says, "So we're sitting there, and the pilots told me to go back and tell him that we can't land in New York and that we're going to have to land in Atlantic City." Jeffrey Epstein said, "Great, we'll call up Trump and we'll go to, I don't recall of the name of the casino, but we will go to a Trump property." Also, here's photos. Donald Trump would bring his kids around Epstein. Donald Trump would go clubbing, hang out, party around Epstein all the time. Multiple pictures there. Also, Mar-a-Lago was used in many ways as a way to bring women to Epstein. For example, Virginia Giuffre, a woman who was trafficked by Epstein. Epstein found her at Mar-a-Lago. That's where he was able to recruit her from. Here's an article about that from Reuters. Later in her childhood, this is about Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims. She was in and out of foster care. By the age of 14, she was living on the streets, where she says she found nothing except for hunger and pain and more abuse. It was in the year 2000, while attempting to rebuild her life, she met British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, and where ultimately she met her was at Mar-a-Lago. She was working in Mar-a-Lago. I think her father was one of the groundskeepers at Mar-a-Lago, and Giuffre was working there. She met Ghislaine. Ghislaine introduced her to Jeffrey, and the rest was history there. Around this time period as well, Donald Trump was doing some other activities like this as well. This was an article about Donald Trump's behavior in 1991 with the Look of the Year competition. Teen models, powerful men, and private dinners. This is from The Guardian, by the way. When Trump hosted Look of the Year in 1991, here's how it was described by The Guardian. On September 1991, a large private yacht cruised toward the Statue of Liberty. It was a clear, breezy evening, and from the upper deck of the Spirit of New York, a golden sunset could be seen glinting off the Manhattan skyline. Downstairs, a party was in flow. Scores of teenage girls in evening dresses and miniskirts, some as young as 14, and I actually think younger than that, danced under disco lights. It could have been a high school prom were it not for the crowd of older men surrounding them. As the evening wore on, some of the men, many old enough to be the girls' fathers or even grandfathers, joined them on the dance floor, pressing themselves against the girls. One balding man in a suit wrapped his arms around 2 young models, leering into a film camera that was documenting the evening. "Can you please get some beautiful women around me, please?" The party aboard the Spirit of New York was one of several events that Donald Trump, then 45 years old, attended with a group of 58 aspiring young models that September. You want to see what they looked like, the aspiring young models who were 14-year-old and I think were younger? Here's a photo of them right here from the competition that Donald Trump held. I'm going to just pause right here and keep this picture up. This was the event that Donald Trump held. These were the girls that Donald Trump was hanging out with in the 1990s, based on this Guardian article, that were on this boat trip that Donald Trump was sponsoring and had for this competition called Look of the Year. So utterly despicable. By the way, when Donald Trump was asked about Ghislaine Maxwell during a press conference that was held while Trump was disgracing the office, while she was going through her criminal trial, and you all remember her criminal trial, what went down in the criminal trial, one of the things that we learned in the criminal trial about Jane Doe, one of the victims who Jeffrey Epstein introduced Jane Doe to Trump at the age of 14. While that testimony was taking place at the criminal trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, testifying at Maxwell's trial in New York, the woman, at that time she was 14, identified now by Jane Doe, said she met Trump in the 1990s at his Mar-a-Lago resort. Trump was asked about it while he was in office, and what he said to Ghislaine is that he wished her well. Play the clip. This is what Donald Trump said about Ghislaine while he was disgracing the Oval Office. Play the clip.
Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and a lot of people want to know if she's going to turn in powerful people. And I know you've talked in the past about Prince Andrew, and you've criticized Bill Clinton's behavior. I'm wondering, do you feel that she's going to turn in powerful men? How do you see that working out?
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well. Whatever it is, I don't know the situation with Prince Andrew. Just don't know. Not aware of it.
Horrific stuff right there. Here is a clip of Donald Trump bragging on the Howard Stern show how he would go backstage during the beauty pageants he sponsored and inspect the women naked, he said. Here, play this clip.
Well, you could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that.
Well, I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show, and everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else, and no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
like
everything is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women, and so I sort of get away with things.
Horrific. Here's Donald Trump as well saying some horrific things about Lindsay Lohan when she was either 17 or the oldest 18 years old. Here's what Trump said. He said because he thought that she suffered from mental illness, that she would be better for him to sleep with because he thought she was mentally ill. Just listen to what he says in his own words. Play this clip.
What do you think of Lindsay Lohan now? I think she's hot. There's something there, right? Yes. But you have to like freckles. I've seen a close-up of her chest. Yes. And a lot of freckles. Are you into freckles? If the father's a wreck, like the way he is. Right. You imagine the sex with this troubled? Yeah, you're probably right. She's probably deeply troubled and therefore great in bed. Back in the day. How come the deeply troubled women? Yes. Deeply troubled. Right. They're always the best in bed. If for some reason what I said is true, I mean, they're just unbelievable. I can tell from the. You don't want to be with them for the long term, but for the short term, there's nothing.
And now finally, listen to this. This is what Donald Trump says about his own daughter, Ivanka, and how he thinks about her and he thinks about sex. Here, play this clip.
She does have a very nice figure. I've said that if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her.
Ivanka, what's the favorite thing you have in common with your father?
Either real estate or golf.
Donald, with your daughter?
Well, I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
If I weren't happily married and, her father.
My daughter, Ivanka.
Yeah.
She's 6 feet tall. She's got the best body.
By the way, your daughter.
She's beautiful.
Can I say this? A piece of ass. Yeah. She looks more voluptuous than ever.
She's actually always been very voluptuous. She's tall. She's almost 6 feet.
You're going up the escalator? I'm going to be dating her in 10 years. Can you believe it?
Folks, this is who he is. So while the release of these new documents that have been released as part of the Epstein files based on the law that was passed in Florida shed more light on Donald Trump's involvement, corporate media, all other media wants to ignore this. Well, you really want to ignore this? You'd rather spend time talking about President Biden telling the truth, but stuttering? That's where you want to spend your time, but not speak about this abhorrent and despicable paper, this despicable conduct by Donald Trump, rather. Look, we should not have our children and our grandkids and our family growing up in a country that normalizes this sick and disgusting behavior by Donald Trump. And by the way, this isn't like opinion. I'm just showing you undisputed facts. I'm showing you his own words. I'm playing for you the video. I'm showing you the call logs. This is disgusting. He's a disgusting person. He is as disgusting as a human being as you get. And I could play you the clips, which I'm not going to, where he brags about sexually assaulting women. He says when you're a star, you get away with it. In a recent deposition, he said, well, fortunately or unfortunately, that's just the way it is if you're a famous person. This is disgusting stuff. We're not normalizing it here on the Midas Touch Network. And while other media outlets refuse to have the courage to report these facts, we're going to report on the facts that they should be reporting. Let me know what you think, and please share this video with others, because corporate media doesn't want to show you. That's why we're showing fact, log. His own words, his own statements. Boom. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million together.
Yeah, the corporate media is not going to do that because it doesn't supply clicks. But yes, that was crazy. What else? Should we go? Yes, let's go to another. Because we're just getting started. We're trying to get the message out. Hopefully people are listening, so.
To what President Biden is talking about today, when President Biden's talking about climate change, lowering prescription drug prices, supporting our democracy. It's important that we remember what politics is actually supposed to be about, not the cosplay fascism that has become the Republican Party with the MAGA takeover that corporate media just loves to amplify. Not here on the Midas Touch Network. Let's take a look at what Donald Trump is saying. None of this is normal. Donald Trump posts or messages, "Do you love America? Guess I've got the perfect hat for you. So if you want to prove you love America, here's what you need to do." Would Ben wear this MAGA hat? And it has the American flag, but with the letters MAGA. Then you can order the MAGA hat for $1,000, of course, or $500. You could qualify to get the hat for $47, but if you want the hat, that would be $1,000. Donald Trump emails the following at 4:28 a.m. 4:28 a.m. he emails, "Call off the dogs." And then he brags. He goes, "I have," and he puts this in all caps, "total immunity on official acts, but Crooked Joe refuses to call off his dogs. Ben, I'm asking you to step in, help force his hand, and make him end these witch hunts once and for all." And you click on the button, drop all charges, and then you somehow have to pay Donald Trump $3,300 or $1,000 or some significant amount of money. That's how you can help drop the charges, apparently, by paying all of that money. It's part of Donald Trump's grift. Then he has this other one where he goes, "totally immune." And then he goes, "I need to hear from you." And then he says that he's going to try to get the Bergdorf case, which by that he means the one where he was found liable by a jury for sexually assaulting a woman. He calls that the Bergdorf case, and he somehow claims that that's an official act of the presidency. According to the leader of the Republican Party, sexual assault is an official act of the presidency, is what he's saying. Then he goes, "The Manhattan scam cooked up by Soros-backed Alvin Bragg, making hush money payments and falsifying business records," Trump is saying is an official act of the presidency. And then he says, "Racist Tish James' shameless attack on the amazing businesses I built, fraudulently inflating your personal properties," he says is an official act of the presidency. So what Donald Trump has turned the presidency into, and what the Supreme Court has endorsed, is a Ponzi scheme, just like the Trump Organization and the businesses that Trump runs that have been found criminally liable for tax fraud, civilly liable for fraud, and he's been found personally liable in a civil case for sexual assault and criminally liable on a personal basis for falsification of business records. And he claims all of that is part of the presidency. Now, imagine your kids and grandkids and family members and future generations going to school and learning about the presidency, and that apparently the official acts of the presidency involve sexually assaulting women. That's what the modern day Republican Party embraces. Oh, you know what they also embrace? An actual revolution. The author of Project 2025 just gave an interview where he said that the MAGA is leading a revolution right now, which they say it could get violent, but they said that it will be up to the left, they say, if their revolution is going to be violent. This is the leader of the Heritage Foundation leading the MAGA Project 2025, but no, the corporate media isn't going to talk about this. Let me show you this clip. Let's play it.
That we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
What the corporate media is going to talk about, though, is they're going to cherry pick their own polls, and they're going to viciously attack President Biden, who's done a great job as president. He had an awful debate. He did. We called it out in real time. We don't mince our words. We're not going to pretend he did well on the debate. Did bad in the debate, but he at least tried to answer the questions truthfully that were asked. Donald Trump didn't do good on the debate. Donald Trump wouldn't accept a peaceful transition of power, which should be disqualifying in and of itself. He literally lied every 15 seconds, lie after lie after lie, and looked and sounded like a maniac. And undecided and independent voters were aware of that. I hate polls. I don't like to talk about polls, but purely for the fact that the corporate media wants to cherry pick theirs. You want to take a look at just take a look at this. In the TIP, which is an A+ poll, one of the most credible top polls out there, Biden, after the debate, is leading 43 to 41%. Now you can say, well, some of the debate was taken after, some of the poll was taken after the debate, some of the poll was taken before, so not all of it was taken after the debate, even though a lot of it was. Oh, okay. It's still reflective of Biden up 43 to 41 and not some sort of blowout that you say exists. And then with the corporate media putting all of their fanciful hypotheticals and not explaining how it would even work, but just interested in throwing the Democratic Party into chaos with unnamed sources. If you look at the Reuters Ipsos poll, which again is a top poll, Biden and Trump are even at 40%. The next is Trump-Harris, which Trump would have a 1-point lead. Trump has a 3-point lead over Gavin Newsom, a 6-point lead over Gretchen Whitmer, a 6-point lead over Governor Pritzker, and a 4-point lead over Bashir. Now, lots of people don't have name recognition yet, or haven't gone out and campaigned, so there's a lot of variables for it. But my point is, if you're going to cherry pick your own things, why don't we actually take a look at the data? And the data was also that a lot of undecideds taken after the debate itself also showed that a lot of the undecideds were actually moving in favor of President Biden because he wasn't lying lie after lie after lie. So if we're talking about like the data doesn't meet the narrative. And also, if you want to talk about the narrative, how about what I've just showed you all here in the first 7 minutes or so of this video of the Trump plan to have a revolution? That's what they're saying. And that it could get violent if the left doesn't accept the violent takeover. How Trump is bragging about king-like absolute immunity. I mean, I showed you other posts in previous days where Donald Trump was saying that he wants to have military tribunals on live television for people like Republican Liz Cheney. I mean, look, Kyle Sweetser, who's a former Trump voter, I had him on the show, he says about the Heritage Foundation threats, this looks like a violent threat. Last week, the Heritage Foundation came out and said they are ditching conservatism and replacing it with Trumpism. Heritage writes, most of Trump's policy controls Trump. Foreign influence from Hungary is pouring into America. Corporate media doesn't cover any of that. Meanwhile, what's President Biden talking about? If President Biden writes, if Big Pharma refuses to lower prescription drug prices and end their greed, we will do everything within our power to end it for them. At Senator Bernie Sanders and I will not rest until every American can afford the prescriptions they need to lead healthy, happy, and productive lives. And they wrote an op-ed talking about how there is no rational reason why Americans for decades have been forced to pay by far the highest prescription drugs in the world that they need. President Biden writes, 60 years ago, President Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964, one of the most significant pieces of legislation in United States history. Today, we continue the work that the act began and stand together, choosing community over chaos. President Biden writes, there is no reason why 1 out of 4 Americans is unable to afford their medicine. Because of my Inflation Reduction Act, seniors and Medicare recipients are paying no more than $35 a month for insulin. And in January, no senior will pay over $2,000 a year for their prescriptions. In addition, President Biden's PACT Act has led to over 1 million claims being processed for life-saving care for our veterans who would never have been able to get that care but for the legislation signed into law and championed by President Biden. On the other hand, Donald Trump stopped bipartisan immigration because Trump wanted to create chaos at the border, knowing that corporate media would just say, oh, there's all this chaos. Let's blame President Biden for it. Let's blame the guy trying to come up with the solutions rather than the arsonist who's bragging about inflicting pain on we the people so that he can run on our pain. The one thing Trump's right about, though, is that the corporate media would run it over and over again and doesn't give a crap about our health, about our money, about how we're treating, about our wages. Corporate media doesn't care about that. They're more into Trump's camp. They want the tax cuts for themselves. They're in that tax bracket. But we, the people, need to recognize what is happening. President Biden also posted the following. Today, I signed the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, a law that will help prevent, treat, and cure Parkinson's disease and similar disorders. This law is about dignity, and it gives people hope that we can end this cruel disease and that we can still do big things. President Biden posts, communities in every corner of our country are being directly impacted by the compounding effects of extreme weather, from heat and floods to wildfires. Today, I received an operational briefing on extreme weather outlooks so that my administration remains ready to respond. On the one hand, President Biden believes in climate change and ways to combat it. On the other hand, Donald Trump does not believe that climate change is a real thing. Here's what President Biden said today about climate change. Play this clip.
Unfortunately, my predecessor and the MAGA Republicans in Congress are trying to undo all this progress. They still deny climate change even exists. They deny climate change even exists. They must be living in a hole somewhere at the expense of health and safety of their own constituents. They deny it exists. Every single congressional Republican voted against the investments which created these jobs and combat climate change. Many of them are trying to repeal those climate provisions and kill those jobs. I quite frankly think it's not only outrageous, it's really stupid. Everyone who willfully denies the impacts of climate change is condemning the American people to a dangerous future, and either is really, really dumb or has some other motive of that. How can you deny there's climate change, for God's sake?
Here's what Donald Trump said about climate change on Friday. Play the clip.
Now, that's only reporting, who knows, but they were very serious. It's called weather. The risk is weaponry. The risk is nuclear warming. And
well, I think that that speaks for itself right there. Finally, President Biden writes, nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. Because of the Supreme Court's decision, the American people will have to do what the court should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people will have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million subscribers.
Yeah, let's get the 3 million subscribers on the Common Sense Party pod. But that's kind of crazy that two vastly different guys and they're close to the polls. It's ungoddamn believable. But hey, let's go on to the war between Russia and Ukraine, and let's listen to this.
Volodymyr Zelensky, having watched the debate, heard what former President Donald Trump said, is potentially ready to sit down with him. He said it'll be tragic for Ukraine if they don't know what comes if former President Trump was to win in November. We also talked about the state of the war. He doesn't like the word stalemate or deadlock. He says the problem is Russia can track if they were to have a counterintensive, because the weapons have been so delayed coming from the United States, even though he was very grateful to the U.S. Congress for recently signing off on the $60 billion. And then finally, John, one thing that I really took away from this conversation, if the war to end, I asked him about a third-party mediator. Who can actually mediate the end of this war? You'd think it would be someone that has credibility in both Russia and Ukraine's eyes. He actually said it needs to be the United States and China. Let's take a listen to the state of the war at play right now from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Домовлялись сторони про ceasefire. We've had agreements about ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia has been always breaking all the agreements and has been killing our people. So only if it's on some international forum in the presence of the countries, leaders who are trusted. They might have different ideas, different views on the stages how this war will be over, but we all have to be on the same side. We have to trust each other. Trust is very important. The Peace Summit, by the way, has shown that we can follow this plan. Over 100 countries were there, and today we're talking about their nuclear security and energy security, and there will be a clear plan. So the ceasefire also needs a clear plan. We must understand that Russia would not be using ceasefire to simply accumulate equipment on the territory, our territory that they've occupied, because we will not be striking them. I mean, they can use that to create a strong fist here and then accuse us of breaking the ceasefire and start another invasion. So it's really complicated for us. It would take a significant loss for us if they invade again, as in the beginning of 2022, when they had almost reached the capital city, and they accumulated a lot of equipment on the territory of Belarus. And Belarus kept saying that, no, it's just the exercise. No occupation is in mind. It's just the training. It's just military games. It's very important. I really don't want to have this big trouble for my country, because we are at war already. Giving the advantage to Russia now, it's just impossible. We need to be smart. And it's important also who will be responsible for this, besides the Ukrainians who are paying with their lives. Which country will be responsible? It's easy to just talk about ceasefire, but it's very difficult to enforce it, to keep it. It's very difficult to find those who will respond why the ceasefire.
But we're going to see more calls for a ceasefire, especially as the world politically is moving to the right and potentially moving to the right in the United States. You have said this war is dependent on U.S. aid. I want to ask you, did you watch the presidential debate between Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump?
Передусім. So, first and foremost, the ceasefire is an important element in any plan to finish the war. So, a ceasefire is not finishing the war. We've been there. It would be just a frozen conflict, and it would be frozen for the aggressor, because it would be frozen on our territory, and our people would be under the occupation. This gives a clear advantage to one side. That's why it's easy to offer different proposals of ceasefires. But what's important? It's important to find answer what would come after. It's the matter of not just the victory. There are many people talking about ceasefire, and it's fine that people are talking, but what would happen next? That is the question. For example, what's the next step? What's the third step? What would be the step when Putin breaks the ceasefire? After the ceasefire, a month after the ceasefire, will he pull out the troops out of Ukraine? Who guarantees that he will pull the troops out of the occupied territories? And there's silence. Nobody has answer. I'm not accusing. I just want to explain that we are at war and we understand this. So, the debates.
I saw
Because
the
the answer of how this might all unravel will depend on also who's at the table from the United States.
Amongst other things, it might depend on who is the president of the U.S. Yes, that's a fact. Because the U.S., the United States of America, today are probably the most powerful player. So the matter whether the United States would be the major international player, whether they want that or they want to focus more on their internal politics. I cannot say, it doesn't depend on me.
So did you watch the debate?
Yes, I watched the debates. So first and foremost, I would say, I don't know, maybe it would be out of tune to what we see in the US media, but I watched. And like, we are not electing the president of the US, so I didn't look at the incumbent president and the former president. I looked at them in terms of Ukraine.
President Trump said he'll end the war before he's elected.
Yeah, I heard
What do you make of that?
Я скажу честно.
Let me be frank.
Давайте, наприклад, це вирішує.
For example,
That's a long pause.
the decision is on US public. But let me just have some reasoning. Так, але для вас це важливо. Yes. So let us imagine that the winner might be Trump in November. And he knows how to end the war. He has a plan. Me, as the president of a country at war, not a theoretical person, but a real-life person, I would like to be prepared. We are 40 million. We're a big country, and we really depend on the aid from the world. And we depend on the aid and the position and the stance of the US. So I would like to understand, what would it mean to finish war fast? Tomorrow, do we want the war to be over tomorrow? We didn't the war even to start. It was Putin who started it. But how do you agree that it would be fair if Trump knows how to end this war? He should tell us today, because if there are risks to Ukraine's independence, there are risks that we will lose the statehood. We want to be prepared for this. We want to understand whether in November we will have the powerful support of the US or we'll be all alone.
Looks like President Zelensky is ready to sit down with former President Trump, given his comments, Jonathan and Lisa, at the debate. When it came to President Biden, he was very careful with his words about his deteriorating health. He didn't really want to weigh in. But I will tell you this, when I asked him...
Again, the bait and switch. He says he has a plan. Let me get in and I will fix it and blah, blah, blah. Doesn't work. Okay, so last couple, we're going to talk about how bad Trump is, but let's go ahead and go with the David Pakman show.
The ground in Atlanta last week at the presidential debate, and he got some amazing interviews with some of the most suck-uppy of the Trump suck-ups, and none of them liked the lines of questioning that they got from Luke. And I'll be honest, Luke made a lot of these guys, including Vivek Ramaswamy, which I will play for you here, he made them look really stupid, really stupid. And we're going to start with the Vivek Ramaswamy conversation, and then we will get to others and different Trump suck-ups reacting to Luke in different ways. Let's start with Vivek Ramaswamy.
One of the attacks against Trump is commonly he wouldn't uphold the Constitution. What's your response to that?
My response to that is that's a lot of projection from the people who are making the accusations.
The reality is, call for the termination of the Constitution?
He did not call for the termination.
A massive fraud of this type actually allows.
So now Luke has the troth from Trump memorized, and he starts reading it to Vivek. Vivek doesn't care. He doesn't want to hear it.
Termination
He
of
did
all
not call.
rules, regulations,
He did not
articles,
call.
even though it's found in the Constitution.
Cite for me one time where Donald Trump
Truth
called for the
Social.
termination of the Constitution.
I'm reading it to you right
He's
now.
Never,
On Truth
he's never
Social.
called for the termination
Fraud,
of the Constitution.
at this time,
Here's what I believe. Answer this question before I go to the next interview.
Vivek sets up, I'm going to go to the next interview. He doesn't even let Luke fully get the quote out. This is how they do it. Luke has the quote. Trump did call and justify the termination of the Constitution, and Vivek just talks over it. That's how he gets out of actually having to contend with the matter.
Well, what I do believe is there's the projection of the people who do call for the termination of the Constitution and their behaviors want to take the decisions away from the voters. And never in American history have we seen the wielding of prosecutorial power to try to eliminate a candidate in the middle of an election while you had extrajudicial means of removing them from the ballot.
But I do want to start with.
All right. And then Luke is just kind of like, oh boy, well, that's pretty interesting stuff. So really nice job. Luke had the quote. Trump did call for it. Vivek won't engage with it. He'll say, well, there's other people who really want to terminate the Constitution and this other thing. And what else can I talk about? Then Elise Stefanik, bomb-throwing MAGA congresswoman, and Luke got her as well. This is really good stuff. So listen.
If you became Trump's vice president, obviously one of the things that has been pointed out, I think on the debate stage, is that Trump tried to get Pence to not certify the election results. Is that something that you agree with or don't agree when it comes to Pence's decision?
I stood up for the Constitution. I had concerns, and I believe that there was unconstitutional overreach in the 2020 election, as the majority of Americans agree with.
Aren't courts supposed to determine that?
The court, it goes to the state legislatures, and in the state of Pennsylvania, they circumvented the state legislature,
I'm saying,
which is unconstitutional.
in terms of the constitutionality, the courts disagree with you, right?
Let me answer your question. In 2020, people understand that this election was unconstitutional, and they understand that the attacks on democracy are by Democrats who are illegally weaponizing the Department of Justice, the radical district attorney's office, who are, that's a form
So
of...
no evidence of that, but it sounds like you are saying that you would go along with an anti-democratic attempt to block the peaceful transfer.
Of course you would. That's why she just wants to rattle off this verbal
Archie
diarrhea.
Before is I disagree with Mike Pence's approach. I stood on the House floor and I stood up for the Constitution and election integrity. I stand by that position, and the American people, that's one of the reasons why they support Donald Trump, because he supports the Constitution.
And off she goes without even saying thank you so much for speaking to me. They're all not at all happy with Luke Beasley being there. And then this may be my favorite. Luke then spoke to Byron Donalds, and this I love.
Uncle Tom alert.
Byron Donalds didn't even have the testicular fortitude to confirm Luke's credentials. As soon as he didn't like the line of questioning, some aide off screen to Byron Donalds asks Luke if he's actually even supposed to be there, which is like when you're trying to look at whether the person asking you the questions has the right slip of paper, which, by the way, Luke did, because I had I was invited to go to the debate, and we were all set up here for a stream, and it was too last minute for me. So I had my credential given to Luke. Of course he's there with credentials. There were multiple layers of security. And Luke, goes, hey, Byron can ask me if he has a question about my credentials. So take a listen to this.
One of the questions that I didn't hear an answer that was super clear from Trump on is so many people, dozens of people who left his administration, very different than Biden's administration, have said, this guy's not fit to be president. Yeah, it's right here. You can do it. Good man.
So I don't know how many of you caught that. An aide to Byron Donald off screen asks, like, do you even have a credential? And Luke says, yeah, it's right here. He can do it, right? If Byron Donalds has a question as to whether Luke's supposed to be there, let Byron ask him about it. Okay, I'll move it back a few seconds so everybody can get that again.
Have said, this guy's not fit to be president. Yeah, it's right here. You can do it. Good man. So how do you explain that? So many people in the room for the most important decision saying this guy can't be anywhere close to the White House.
Well, first of all, let's say this. When you fire people, whether it's an administration or even out of a company, and I've noticed this in politics, political people don't think they should ever be fired, even when they're doing a bad job. A lot of times what frustrates the American people is political people fail and then they get promoted. And that's frankly what pisses a lot of people off. So if Donald Trump looked at people who were working for him early on and got rid of them and they have an axe to grind, I can't be concerned about
like Pence or all those people.
Or am I going to answer?
I give you a good amount of time.
Let me answer. Let me get to this.
He wants to, the reason they do this, he wants to run out the clock, give a single filibustering answer that's long enough that then he can go, listen, I got to move on because I've spent a lot of time with you. rather than allowing Luke follow-ups, of which there would be endless follow-ups, because Byron Donalds is just being deceptive with every single word here. It's a strategy they use. Some of them use it better than others, right? I mean, he's working to prevent Luke from getting another question.
Now, will you answer the question, though?
Yep.
You ready? Here we go. Now, Alejandro Mayorkas is a failure. Our border is wide open. Tony Blinken is a failure. Israel is embroiled in war. Ukraine is embroiled in war. Pete Buttigieg, this dude took off for a month. Nobody even knew he was gone.
You're not talking about Trump's administration officials.
Are you talking or am I talking?
Taking a long route to it.
Bro, I know on your side,
Mike Pence. Let's go with just Mike Pence.
On your side, I know you guys will just use talking points, but when you get...
The funny thing is, Luke asked a question. There's no... The talking points are... Luke asks Byron Donalds a question about the Trump administration, and Byron Donalds spends 70 seconds talking about Pete Buttigieg and Alejandro Mayorkas, which has nothing to do with the question, and then Byron has the audacity to go, you guys just use talking points. He's not even addressing even remotely the substance of the question.
The educated answer. Be patient and let me give it to you.
I want to hear Mike Pence, other administration officials, then I'm ready.
You go over there, and then when you're ready to have a conversation, come see me.
I'm ready. There we go. So Byron Donalds walking
Such
away.
arrogance.
When you don't allow them, and the truth is, this happens when we have a member of Congress on here and they start their filibustering. If I just interrupt the way Luke beautifully did here every time and go, you're not answering the question. Wait, but what about what I asked? What about what I asked? They just end the interview, and that's exactly what Byron Donalds is doing here by walking away. Really, really nice job by Luke. And then Luke also spoke to Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. He brought up the whole kerfuffle with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And let me play a little bit of that for you. It's also very, very interesting.
Absolutely. Just quick question. I'll get screamed at by my audience if I don't ask about Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I won't give you a general basic question. Instead, I want you to explain to my viewers, what do you think? Because I think it's a lot. Marjorie Taylor Greene represents about the current state of the Republican Party, about this MAGA contingent.
Yeah. So here's the deal. We only have one her because, I mean, it's just hard to be that bad, to be perfectly honest. But we do know that she emulates Trump. She's like a baby Trump, right? She doesn't have policy ideas. She doesn't do anything but cause distractions. She doesn't do anything but name call and pick, and that's not what it is to be an elected official. That's what it is to be an ugly bully, and that's exactly what she is.
We got a problem with bullying.
Don't think that it's okay for her and her ratings around this country, her favorability, she's the lowest of all the Republicans according to our numbers. So if you don't like it when Marjorie does it, you shouldn't like it when Donald does it either, because that's where she's getting her cues from. A little bit more frequently than the everyday citizen. They get to see the strong, competent, compassionate person that he is. And I think that that's what made everyone fall in love with him before. And so this is an opportunity for them to all fall in love with him again, because we know that there's only one person that can talk policy. There's only one person that has...
All right, so making the case there for Biden after what at that point was a disorientingly poor performance from President Biden. So really nice job there by Luke. You can check out Luke's channel at davidpakman.com/Luke. And we got to get Luke in more of these.
Yeah, he's young. Yep. We're going to do it one more time. Trump scammed the barber? I wonder why.
Week, there was this very strange event where Republican Congressman Byron Donalds went to a black barbershop, and Trump called in and he was on speakerphone, and it seemed weird. And I told you that the guys hanging out at the barbershop didn't seem too thrilled with the entire thing. Well, it has now completely imploded in perfectly predictable fashion, where the owner of the barbershop says he was used by the Trump campaign. He was asked to hold a private roundtable to help black-owned small businesses, and he was not told this is a de facto Trump campaign event. That's why the guys didn't look thrilled. So check this out. This is the bottom of the barrel stuff from the Trump campaign and from Byron Donalds, who's a disgusting person.
The owner of Rocky's Barbershop in Atlanta says he feels he was misled by a campaign event for former President Trump the day before the debate. Rocky Jones tells our Karis Belger he thought his Buckhead shop was just hosting a forum for black businesses, but he says he never expected to fade into the realm of politics.
To me, cutting hair is like an art.
And smooth waves are not the only thing Rocky Jones wants his shop to be known for.
We try to specialize in just giving good service to the community. As you can see, I've been here since 17 years, and it's been good.
Which is why he jumped at the chance to help other black business owners get ahead.
Started with a text, then it went to a call, because I was actually out the country. And just me agreeing to do a black small business, round table. I thought it was like something real private.
It was anything but. Rocky, along with black business owners from across metro Atlanta, crammed into his shop, along with Trump surrogates like Ben Carson. But it wasn't all shop talk.
Thinking about black business in Atlanta, small black businesses in Atlanta. And I'm like, okay, so when are we going to start talking about this?
He says a call from former President Trump during the event cut deep.
Why is the ex-president calling somebody in my barbershop? This has nothing to do with small black businesses.
So listen, it was another one of these scams, okay? Here's one of the clips from last week that I played for you. And knowing nothing about the scam nature of this, I said, these guys don't seem too thrilled with what Trump is telling them. Remember this?
Well, as you know, I cut taxes and regulations more than any other president. We had the biggest tax cut, bigger even than the Reagan tax cuts. And I also cut regulations far more than any other president.
So as you can see, not a crowd that seems thrilled with Trump's talk of tax cuts. There was also the totally Kafka-esque moment where Trump said, black folks really loved that I was arrested and given a mugshot. And we now learn that it was all a scam. Trump recently did a speech at a black church, and we looked around and it was 92% white people shipped into the black church for Trump to get his photo ops, bizarre photo ops, because everybody was mostly white. And then now we find out this, but let's do a panel on black small businesses. Great. Here's Trump on the phone, sleepy Ben Carson coming in. Absolutely disgusting. But what's the prism through which we have to understand this? The prism is Trump only cares about what is good for him. That's it. Debasing himself, disrespecting people. They do not care as long as it's what they think is good for them in the moment. And that's what he did. And another completely farcical campaign event. I've had such trouble finding a great razor.
All right, folks. Yep. That was total fact that he set up the barbershop. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going on probably 2.5 hours of this podcast. I appreciate you for listening. We appreciate everyone for listening. So again, thank you for listening from Broadman, Washington, Purdue, Canada, Asheville, Tennessee, Tappahannock, Virginia. Someone from that area, please tell me what it is. Oh, let's do this. Hold on. I did a Google search and it is Tappahannock, Virginia. Hopefully I said it right. For the people who are listening in this area, please email us and tell us the proper pronunciation. It's an hour and a half from where I live. And we have Columbus, Georgia, or Columbus, Ohio. We appreciate you. Norcross, thank you. We have the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have Hong Kong. We have Phoenix, Arizona. Brussels, Belgium, Dallas, Texas, or Dallas, Georgia, Russian Federation, London, England. Got Pittman. I think this is Pittman, New Jersey. I have a sister in New Jersey. Tell her I said hi, but that's not where she lives. Fort Worth, Texas, Hillsborough, North Carolina, San Jose, Texas. And we have Japan. We have another 2 spaces in Germany I can't pronounce. We have Turton, Italy, Columbia. We have Flowery Branch. We have Forest City, Tennessee. And we have Sunnyvale, California. We really appreciate you guys listening. Please tell a friend to tell a friend. Rate, follow, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend. This is the Common Sense Party Podcast. I'm your host, DOTTLEY. Our mission is to inform our listeners on topics that affect the everyday person. Rate, review, follow, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Please give us 5 stars, give us 4 stars, give us 2 stars, give us 2 stars. Yes, you can even give us 1 star. Don't give us any star. I'll just assume I'm doing it properly. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. We are available on Spotify, Amazon Music, Samsung Podcast, Pandora, YouTube Music, formerly Google Podcasts. Tune in, and yes, we're available on Apple Podcasts. You can contact us at the Common Sense Party Pod at gmail.com. We're available on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can support via Cash App or Zelle. The information is available on our About page or platform. Today we talked about Trump, talked about hurricanes, we talked about Ted Cruz, we also talked about presidential immunity. Again, please come out and vote, and please join the movement.